So patch 1.4 is on its way, set to release somewhere mid-October, and it will be all about fixing the issues with the Division and try to make the whole experience a lot more fun again. Because the developers do not want to do this alone and want to go into this together with the player base, they have decided to take a couple of unexpected measures. For one, they are opening a very much needed public test server on the PC platform where everybody will be able to test the new things and updates coming in the upcoming patch. But they're also inviting people that have a lot of experience with the game over to their studio to provide ideas and feedback on the changes that they've made so far and are going to make in the future. Now, of course, I'm happy to tell you that I have also been invited to this event. I will be going there from the 6th to the 10th this month, and I'll be doing as much as I can to help to make this patch the patch that will turn this game around. And although I hope that I will be able to lay out my thoughts and ideas on the table, I also want to make a video about the core issues and my solutions to those. This way you will all be able to see what kind of ideas I have and what I'm going to try to propose there. And of course you can give feedback on my ideas, but it will also be easier for me to refer to this video while I'm there if I get the chance to bring something like this up. You know, so that if I want to explain something clearly, I will have this video to help me out. It's a lot easier to fully write a script out for a video like this than to explain it right there on the fly. Nevertheless though, it's going to be a pretty lengthy video because we aren't just looking at the problems, but in a lot of the cases we're also looking at what causes these problems and thus try to come to a better conclusion on how to fix those issues. It is easy to say that you can just adjust a couple of numbers that may fix the game in one area, but most of the time that doesn't really fix it in another area. It doesn't fix it in a bigger picture. I want this patch to be the game changer, literally speaking. But for the ease of use, I've separated this video into 6 major categories. The first one is the NPC and the player scaling. Then we have the talents, which will cover both the PvE and the PvP aspects of this game, but it will focus primarily on the PvE. Then we have the overall balancing of the whole game. We have Statrolls on gear, we have rewards, and last but certainly not least, we have gameplay. Now, I can guarantee you one thing, that after this whole list of issues and possible fixes, there will still be things in this game that simply aren't 100% like you would want it to work. But honestly, I really do believe that if we tackle all the main core issues with this game, the ones that I mentioned above, then we can further build upon that in the future. So with that in mind, let's talk about the first topic on the list, the NPC and player scaling. Almost every game that I have ever played where character progression was a key part of the game, the enemies have always scaled with the player. They didn't become smarter or behave differently from the level 1 enemies, they just had more health and did a whole lot more damage. This is pretty standard and basic for an RPG game, and in most cases this isn't considered an issue at all. It is an issue in the Division, however, because the NPCs at a higher level are scaled up way too much. They have too much health and deal too much damage to the point where even if you're maxed out on gear, you still die in 1 or 2 shots and you have to empty 1 or 2 magazines to kill someone. To fix this issue, one could say that all of this required is to lower the numbers on the NPCs a bit, you know, give them less health and give them less damage and voila, the problem is solved, right? Right? Not really. To understand why this wouldn't solve the issue, we have to look at what causes these NPCs to be so strong. Yes, it is the damage numbers and health, but why are they scaled up so much? I think that the main reason lies within the way that the players scale up. When you get to the end game, your damage mitigation starts to matter a whole lot more than your actual health. You have armor, which can give you up to a 75% damage mitigation. Then you can get skills such as the smart cover and the booster shot, which can give you another 75 to 90% damage mitigation on top of what we already had. And in some cases, you can even stack exotic damage resilience on top of that. This causes the player's effective health to scale beyond ridiculousness. As a normal example, let's say that a player has 100,000 hit points. This guy doesn't have any armor, he doesn't have any skills on, he doesn't have any damage mitigation. This player's effective health would be 100,000. That makes sense, right? You know, you have 100,000 hit points, no damage mitigation, so you die with 100,000 damage. But now let's say that this player is doing an incursion, you know, he played the game a lot, he's kept on armor and he has a maxed out smart cover. Still a pretty common scenario, right? I mean, most people are running around with the armor cap and have that smart cover available to them. But because he has that 75% damage mitigation from the armor cap and another 75% damage mitigation on top of that from the smart cover, his effective health now sits at 1.6 million hit points. He is 16 times as tanky as that he would have been without any damage mitigation. Massive sees this, they know that most players are going to be playing with that smart cover, so they know they have to balance the NPCs around that amount of damage mitigation. And thus the NPCs have to hit so much harder than normally, otherwise players with the armor cap and the smart cover, they would literally not be able to die. Massive says that they want the player to die from about 4 shotgun rounds to the face. Normally a shotgunner would hit for around 25,000 damage, but to kill a player with the armor cap and smart cover, the NPC now has to hit for 16 times that amount. So the NPC hits for 400,000 damage, which is, still 1/4 of your effective health in smart cover. But now let's say that another player comes across that same NPC. It isn't gonna be some ridiculous scenario. This player is also pretty much maxed out on gear. He is at the armor cap as well. The only difference is that he's using the pulse and the first aid, so he doesn't have that damage mitigation from smart cover. He has 100,000 health though, and as I said, he has the armor cap. 75% damage mitigation. So his effective health sits at 400,000 hit points. Guess what though? This player walks in, he walks past a few NPCs in the dark zone. He pulls aggro on one of the shotgunners, and because the shotgunner is balanced around people playing with smart cover, it does 400,000 damage, instantly killing the player. And that's pretty much the story of this game, right? You can get 1 or 2 shotted by NPCs the moment that you leave smart cover. So what do we do about this? How do we balance this out? We can scale the NPCs back a bit, reduce the amount of health and damage that they do, balance it around people without smart cover. Would that work? Not really, because that would make the game too easy for people that are actually using smart cover. It's either too hard for one person not using a particular skill, or too easy for another that is using that particular skill. We're stuck in a rat hole where we can never balance the game out for everybody. Some things are mandatory to have in this game. Another thing that a lot of people brought up was to just nerf skills like smart cover and pulse so that the NPCs can be scaled back a bit as well. We would still balance them around the skills, but the gap between using and not using smart cover and pulse and stuff like that will be a lot smaller. And the NPCs will not hit as hard if you were to choose not to use them. The thing is though, is that I don't think that it would solve anything, really. Either smart cover will still be sort of mandatory in the endgame activities to effectively fight the NPCs, or it will be nerfed so hard into the ground that it loses all its use and becomes just another thing on the list that we look and laugh at when somebody is running with it. But if nerfing smart cover and pulse and those things, if that's not the answer, then what do we do? Well, it's going to sound a little bit crazy, but I think we should remove damage mitigation from the game entirely and change up the way that armor works. Instead of armor giving you damage mitigation, let the armor count towards a second health bar that you can call your armor bar, and that will have to be drained before you can take damage on your health, very similar to what the NPCs have in the game right now. I believe that Like Butter already proposed this idea in a different way. He wanted a part of the player's health bar to be transformed into armor, but his reasoning behind that was so that there will be an armor shred mechanic versus players in the Dark Zone as well, and it will make some talents and gear stat rolls more useful. And although that can definitely be an interesting byproduct of, the players having an armor bar, I propose that you get rid of the damage mitigation in this game altogether and put the armor into a second health bar instead. This way, one player's toughness will be determined by the health plus the armor, and most importantly, it will be additive, meaning that the NPCs do not have to be skilled so ridiculously to provide meaningful damage to the player. And capping out on armor, so to speak, it will not be mandatory at all. This will allow for more build diversity. So, how would this bar work? How would this armor bar work? Well, it would work very similar to the health bar that you get when you enter mobile cover. Your armor first has to be destroyed before you can take damage on your health, but this armor can also be healed up again, or as I'd like to call it, repaired. I think it's important that the armor bar completely regenerates by itself, but only when you're out of combat and when you haven't taken damage for quite a long time. This will give solo players more freedom in being able to take a few hits without the need of always running with the first aid skill. They have that armor bar to sort of protect them. Skills that previously gave extra damage mitigation, such as the smart cover, could perhaps regenerate the armor while you're using smart cover, even when you're taking damage. There's a lot to experiment here with, and you know, you have to see what works and what doesn't work. Do the healing skills repair the armor as well? What will happen to all the damage mitigation that you get from other skills? Can you regenerate your armor if you're not on full health? You know, I've got my own ideas on how these could work, but a little bit of testing, that of course wouldn't hurt. The most important part to take away from this is that we eliminate damage mitigation, and thus the NPCs can be skilled towards 0 damage mitigation, and thus if you have a decent health pool, you will never be one-shotted by an NPC that shouldn't be able to one-shot you. And yes, like butter, we can also have armor shred mechanics in PvP as well with this. Everybody will be happy. Next topic that I want to go over are the talents, mainly the talents on the weapons. To begin with, there are a lot of issues that I have with many of the talents in this game that kind of push, you know, the talents such as brutal, deadly, and fierce to a must-have point, and the other talents pretty much useless. So much of them are just badly designed and therefore almost always considered as trash. For example, you have many talents such as predatory, talented, steady, restored, commanding, meticulous, determined, sustained, skilled, and dominant, that all require you to kill a target for it to activate. Even whole stat rolls on gear, such as held on kill, require you to kill a target for it to become, you know, useful, which I think is a super bad mechanic in a team-based game. It basically means that a damage dealer or someone with high damage will always be able to utilize these talents way more efficiently than any dedicated tank or healer. And that wouldn't be a problem if most of these talents wouldn't be orientated around healers and tanks. I mean, please don't tell me that held on kill, predatory, sustained, and restored are better for damage dealers than that they are for tanks. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but I think this game has been made with damage dealers in mind. You can see it back everywhere, even in, you know, talents such as self-preserved, which heals you for a certain percentage of the critical hit chance damage done to enemies. It favors people who deal more damage and have more crit. That's usually not going to be the tank player, but the bonus that you get, more health, would be very useful for a tank player. You see where I'm going with this? Most of the tank and the healing orientated talents still require you to have high damage, and even to activate them you need a high amount of firearms, meaning that even if you can get the killing blows on targets as a tank player if you're playing by yourself, for example, 9 out of 10 times you will still not get value because the talents will be locked unless you have it on a free slot, of course. And then you also have talents such as toxic, meticulous again, harmful, intense, and proficient that have a certain percentage tied to them, making them completely random on whether they actually work or not. Sometimes you can destroy someone with these, making them very effective, and other times you're fighting for 5 minutes without it activating once. That's not a very good thing. The same thing of course goes for the special type of resistances, such as shock resistance, fire resistance, bleed resistance, and so on. Sometimes you cannot seem to get shocked by the shock turrets at all because you have 25% resistance. And then another time, the shock turrets just keep going at you and going at you. There's no consistency, and thus you always have to kind of expect the worst case scenario. You always have to expect to get shocked even though you have 50% resistance. And that gives these statistics and talents almost zero value. If you cannot rely on something to work, then you cannot use it. Just look at the ballistic shield. These things have to be changed. Otherwise you have the situation where we are in right now, where people only chase a handful of things and the rest of the talents and statistics are just garbage, making the RNG even more harsh than that it already is. What I propose that you do with these talents is that you let them occur every so many seconds. For example, we have Intense right now. Instead of the first bullet in the magazine having a 13% chance to apply the fire effect, change it to that the first bullet of a magazine will apply the on fire effect to a target, but it can only happen once every 2 minutes. And it doesn't trigger if you miss the first bullet of a magazine. And then of course you can put a small icon underneath the health bar to check the cooldown. The same way that they're doing with many of the talents already. This way you add consistency to the talent and you can go into a fight knowing whether you have it up or not. In a perfect world you would have a button to manually activate it, to manually put someone on fire every 2 minutes, but I don't know if that's possible on consoles because you have limited buttons there, and you can have up to 3 of these talents on a single gun. I don't think that would work with, the limited buttons. But that's a topic for another time. Let's just put it on a passive that happens every so many seconds. Moving on, I want to talk about the next thing, that is balance. We kinda already went over this with the talents because of course we're making the weaker talents stronger, so there's a more even playing field. But there are still a lot of things with the game that I would like to see changed or removed. Mainly the consumables and the way that healing works. And skill cooldowns, so I guess that's 3 things. I've already proposed one of these ideas before, but I would really like to see consumables removed from the game and put the power that those consumables can provide back into other things such as weapon talents. For example, we have that 40% extra healing consumable. Change that into a talent for a tanky player. Just as an example, after losing all your armor, all healing and all armor repair is increased by 150% for 10 seconds. This can occur once every 60 seconds. And then again, put a cooldown icon underneath the health bar. Would you want this talent instead of brutal or deadly on your weapon? Maybe, maybe not, but I mean, it gives options. That's what we want. It puts the power of the consumables into useful talents. Another example is maybe fire bullets. Oh wait, there is already a talent in the game for fire bullets, and I already gave that as an example in this video. Why are fire bullets consumables in the game? I just don't understand it. Who's going to take the damn talent, which gives you a small chance on the first bullet of a magazine to get a fire bullet, when with one click of the button, you can have 100% fire bullets all of the time, without any stat requirements to unlock the talent either. I hope you can see my point here. If you want fire bullets, you can get them, but on a cooldown, and you have to give up a talent like brutal or deadly, and you have to put intense on your gun. This game needs trade-offs. You shouldn't be able to have both the maximum amount of damage and incredible crowd control on top of that with just one click of the button. Consumables need to go and their power needs to be put into interesting talents. And then we'll find a different purpose for Reclaimer. Trust me on that. It's not that hard to rework it. Now the other thing that needs to change is the way that healing works and how skill cooldowns work currently. We all know the typical 4-man squad running around in circles, running through all their heals so that they can basically not die and get their cooldowns and their skills back almost instantaneously. There are a couple of things at work here that just break the game completely. First up, it's triage. That talent just needs to go or needs to be altered drastically. The second thing is that people should never be able to exit and re-enter the same first heal to be healed for 4 or 5 times of the intended amount. And then last up, I really think that the overall cooldown on the skills needs to be increased. Even without the triage talent, you can basically spam skills and have a 100% uptime of whatever you're using at that time. The pulse, the healing station, the smart cover, all those things. You can keep them up almost 100% of the time with ease. You don't even need a lot of skill power. And I don't know if you remember leveling up from level 1 to level 30, but cooldowns on skills meant something there, and they could be as long as a minute. I think that increasing the cooldowns on all of the skills globally will impact the game in a very positive way, especially considering that with the other changes I made earlier this video, having a smart cover up is not going to be the difference between dying and staying alive anymore. The NPCs will not be that strong anymore. We changed that already. People need to be forced to use their cooldowns wisely and not just spam everything. Spamming makes for a very unenjoyable experience because there's really no counterplay. If their shock turret dies, they just place another. If they miss their sticky, they just shoot another one. It's very annoying and not a lot of fun. What I do believe we have to be very careful about though is not slowing down the gameplay too much. Yes, we want to stop the shock turret spam. Yes, we want to push that cover-to-cover gameplay and force players to be a little bit more strategic. But we do not want people to spend half of their playtime waiting in cover for their heals to be back up. So, on top of the increased cooldowns, I also want to implement a way for a skill-orientated player, or otherwise called a healer, to be able to have his cooldowns just as fast as what they currently are. Luckily, the solution for that is already in the game, and it is called Skill Haste. Skill Haste is a statistic that overrides the cap on the skills. And with 100% skill haste, you can literally get your skills back twice as fast. Watch this mobile cover cooldown just get back in 7.5 seconds. The problem with skill haste in its current state is that the majority comes from skills. If you stand in an ammo cache support station or the healing smart cover, you will get like 50 or 60% skill haste, making almost anything that you roll on gear pretty much useless. And keeping it like this, it would kind of force the skill heavy player to always at least have one of those available. That's what we need to change, which gets me to my fourth point. The gear stat rolls. In my best in slot video guide, I explained that in many cases it was quite obvious which stats you would want on certain gear items and which ones you don't want, because most of the time the other options just fell short in every other way. Skill power was rolled so absurdly high that you can roll skill power on a backpack and use that to get your cooldowns back faster than if you were to take skill haste, which only has one sole purpose, and that is to get cooldowns back faster. But skill power does it better and it does more. That's a problem. With the 1.4 patch, all these values have to be thrown around a bit. Skill power needs to be reduced, that's for sure. Health needs to be increased because that's absurdly low. Skill haste needs to be rolled on more places, and the values need to be a lot higher as well. The same goes for the signature skill resource gain, and I can just keep going on. I'm not here to point out every individual problem, I'm here to tell you about the bigger picture. The stat rolls need to be looked at. And with all these changes, you can see how players become more reliant on their build and on their gear, rather than on what skill they happen to be using at that time. Having a min-max character means a lot more than not having a min-max character. And that brings me very rapidly to my fifth point, which is the rewards. It is very plain and simple. If the game is going to rely more heavily on what stats you roll, and to be honest, even if the game is not going to rely on that, this game needs to reward players with more and better loot. I like the idea that there are certain places where you can get certain gear items as it makes them farmable, so to speak. I don't mind going to Falcon Lost to get Tactician's gear and then going to another incursion to get that kind of gear set. What I do not like, however, is that these gear sets are often divided in tiers because of the gear score, and anything below the 268 gear set items, it will simply not be as good in the long run. I explained in my solo player video that most of the time players are trying to play this game instead of actually playing it. They're always trying to get ready for the next end game content instead of actually acquiring a decent set and then using that to enjoy the game. This needs a major overhaul. First up, I suggest that the best loot in the game drops in every endgame activity, no matter the difficulty. But in higher difficulties, you would get more of it, so for those that can actually do heroic content, it will be more time efficient. As an example, Falcon Lost Hard Mode should give you one 268 gear set piece of either sentries, strikers or tacticians. Challenge mode gives you 2 of those, and then heroic mode gives you 3. This way, you always feel like you're getting something out of your run and not just, a filler piece for when you can finally do that challenge or heroic mode content. Sure, you can get unlucky about, what item you actually get and the stat rolls on it, but loot will be raining from the sky, you will have more options to choose from, and you will never feel like you're getting nothing out of your run. I've also seen the idea float around of tokens, where you globally collect tokens, which you can then trade in for a gear set item of any choice at a certain vendor. However, I kinda believe that would make the game feel like even more of a grind, because you aren't exactly going to be excited about your loot anymore. You're just saving up enough tokens all day until you can go to the vendor again to roll another dice. It will become the crafting meta all over again, where we had to get crafting materials all day to then roll the dice at the crafting table. It's not very exciting, and that's exactly what I want to avoid. If you want all the gear sets to drop in whatever activity you want to do, I can see your point, so you don't have to just grind one mission. Then I propose you being able to select 3 or 4 different gear sets at the base of operations, and then any activity that you do in the game, that will drop those gear sets and only those gear sets alone. This way you can play whatever activity you want, but you can still be building towards that character that you're after. The same could be done to maybe high-end weapons or high-end items. Yes, and you're going to create a situation where people are only going for, the best weapons or this or that gear set, and the other gear sets are never to be seen again. But don't forget, that's because the gear sets that are currently in the meta are the strongest. And the gear sets that are not so good are simply one tweak away from being the next best thing. Just look what happens to Strikers and Sentry. They can change what those do on the fly, although in that case it was a nerf and people weren't too happy about that. What I'm trying to say, more rewards, better rewards. The ideas are all on the table. What I want to finish this video off with is a quick word about the gameplay. I'm not going too in depth, I have my expectations. Obviously I'm expecting all the major bugs to be removed with this patch. I want to be able to use my skills without them glitching out every other minute. But I also think it's important to quickly mention that the skills need to be usable with a lot more smoothness. I often feel like that there's a big delay between the user activating a skill and the skill actually working. Most of the time this is due to the animation that happens in between, you know, the player grabs the skill, puts it on the wall, and then it activates. I personally think it would be better if the skill started working the moment that you press the button, even before the animation has started. Yeah, it would be a little bit unrealistic, and for half a second your smart cover would work without the character actually putting it on the wall. But it will make the game a lot less frustrating, it will be a lot more reliable. When I press the heal button, I want it to work instantly and not wait for the character to press the healing button thingy and then wait for it to take effect. But yeah guys, that pretty much puts my long list of important things to an end. I think that all these things should be looked at with the 1.4 patch. I think all these things have a very high priority on my list. I'm sure that Massive has their own ideas and their own priorities of how they want to approach this patch, but I wanted to share this before going to Massive Studios, so I can go in blindly and maybe they can see if their ideas line up with what I have to think or what I have to say. Again, I'm sure that after all these changes there will still be a lot of things to look at, such as some of the gear set bonuses that will not be very powerful, or people that will be able to one-shot sticky bomb you again because exotic damage resilience is gone. But that's nothing that a few number tweaks cannot fix. What we're doing in this video is just looking at the core problems of the game and providing possible solutions for those. As always, let me know what you guys think about my ideas if you've made it this far into the video. I know, I told you it was gonna be very, very lengthy. But yeah, feedback is important because just as you guys, all I'm trying to do is improve the game. I want to see this game shine and maybe rise to the top again. I don't know, I really like the Division and I want to see it continue. As always, I will see you guys later, or like they say in the Netherlands, zie je later!